first glyph lit the moment Marin's hand left the survey rod, and she said, out loud, to the dark, "Is anyone still in there?" She hadn't meant it as a question. She'd been on the site for 9 days, breathing recycled air and cataloging silence, and the words just came out the way words do when you've been alone too long with something that won't answer. A reflex, the kind of thing you say to a jammed door or a dead console. She was already turning back toward the equipment crate when the obsidian surface of the monolith shifted, not physically, not with any grinding of stone, but in the way that black ice shifts when light finds it from a new angle, and the glyph that'd been inert for 11,000 years became something else entirely. She stopped. I know this because I was 3 meters behind her, holding a light standard and a cup of cooling field ration tea, and I am the one who watched it happen. My name is Ressa. I have been Marin's survey assistant for 6 years. I have seen her angry, seen her bored, seen her methodical in the way that only the genuinely brilliant can sustain. Patient as geology. But I have never seen her go as still as she went. In that moment. Not still like a person who is frightened. Still like a person who has just understood something enormous and is waiting to be sure. The monolith was 4 meters tall and 2 wide, set into the far wall of what the survey team had been calling Chamber Null, the lowest accessible level of the excavation on Veth Caro, a dead world 14 light-years off the peripheral route. No atmosphere to speak of. No native life recorded since the initial survey 6 decades back. What Veth Caro had, buried under 400 meters of compressed mineral strata, was this. A vault of worked stone and alien alloy that predated every known spacefaring civilization in the recorded catalog. And at its center, Null, this monolith. Black as deep water. Carved with a script that no linguistic engine in 3 academic surnomes had cracked. Silent for as long as anything on this world had been silent, which was a very long time. The Voldesi Compact had sent a team here 40 years ago. 17 scholars, 2 military attachés, a pair of their finest resonance readers. The monolith had given them nothing. Not a flicker. The Compact's lead archivist had pressed her palm flat against the surface for 6 hours in rotating shifts, and written afterward that the structure was either inert or so far beyond current understanding as to be effectively inert. The report used the word dead 4 times. The Oranathi Ecclesiastical Commission came next, 12 years later. They brought ritual instruments and a doctrine of awakening that had apparently worked on lesser relics across 3-star systems. They sang at it. They burned consecrated resins. One of their senior figures wept openly at the monolith's base for 2 days straight, convinced that grief was the key. Mission's final assessment. Sealed. Irrevocably sealed. They carved a small marker in the antechamber stone above and went home. Private Salvage Consortium tried to cut into it 8 years after that. The cutting equipment stopped working. Not dramatically. No explosion. No repelling force field. The tools simply ceased to function within a meter of the surface, and when the crew moved them back, tools worked fine again. The consortium filed an anomalous materials report and moved on. Marin's team was here for something narrower. Baseline acoustic mapping of the lower chambers for the Regional Excavation Authority. Not the monolith specifically. The monolith was listed in our project brief as a secondary point of interest, not primary. We had 14 days on site and a modest instrument budget and no particular expectation of success. Hearn had looked at the previous team's and said, simply, she found it interesting that everyone who had tried to open it had brought something to offer. Instruments, doctrine, grief, cutting tools, and no one had apparently thought to just ask. I had laughed. She hadn't been joking. The glyph that lit first was at the monolith's center, roughly at Marin's eye level. A horizontal bar of silver light, thin as a scratch, widened over 3 or 4 seconds into something geometric. A symbol I didn't recognize from any of the survey catalogs. Then the glyph above it lit. Then 2 beside it. The pattern spread outward from that first point of contact like frost moving across glass, deliberate and unhurried, each symbol igniting in sequence and holding its light, and the aggregate brightness of it began to fill Chamber Null, with something that was not quite light and not quite heat, but was both in some portions I couldn't name. I put the cup down. Marin still had not moved. Her hands were at her sides. Her head was slightly tilted, The way it goes, when she is thinking hard and doesn't want the thinking interrupted. The glyphs kept spreading. By the time they had covered a third of the monolith's surface, the light was strong enough to read by, and I could see the other two members of our team, Pelor and the junior acoustic technician, whose name I will not include here because she did not consent to be in anyone's account of this, backing toward the chamber entrance. Not running, backing. The way you move when your instincts are firing, but your professional training is holding you in check. I did not back up. I am aware this probably says something about me. Mostly I think it says that I had been watching Maren work for 6 years, and I had learned that, when she went still like that, the correct response was to stay close and pay attention. The glyphs reached the top edge of the monolith. They reached the sides. The last sections to illuminate were the 2 lower corners, and when those lit, the entire surface of the monolith was alive with silver script, all of it burning at steady, even intensity, and the chamber was bright as a clear afternoon and perfectly, profoundly quiet. Then the surface opened. Not like a door, not like a mechanism unsealing. The obsidian face of the monolith became permeable, is the only word I have for it. Like the surface of still water disturbed from below, and from within that disturbance came light of a different quality. Warmer, deeper, the color of old amber held up to a window. It pulsed once, slowly, the way a heart beats when it has just remembered it is supposed to. Maren exhaled. The voice, when it came, was not a sound. I want to be precise about this, because I know how it will be written up in the formal record. And I want at least one account that is honest. It was not transmitted through air. It was not a vibration that traveled to the ear. It arrived as a thing already understood. The way you sometimes wake from a dream with a knowledge you cannot source, cannot remember learning, find sitting fully formed in your mind. One moment it was not there. The next it was, complete and irreversible. You were never lost, inheritor. Maren made a sound that I don't think she knew she made. Something small in the back of her throat. Then she was quiet again. I looked at her face. What I saw there was not triumph. Not the particular brightness of us, a person who has achieved something they worked for. What I saw was recognition. The expression of someone who has just hand back something they didn't know had been taken from them, and who is trying to understand how long ago the taking happened, and what it means that the thing they lost was held in trust by something 11,000 years old, waiting in the dark of a dead world for someone to simply think to ask. The glyphs held their light for a long time after. When we finally filed our reports, Maren's and mine, and the hasty second-hand accounts from Pelor, and the technician, the word that appeared in every version, including the authorities' formal summary, was unprecedented. 14 pages of unprecedented. Committees formed. Scholars were contacted. The Valdesi Compact sent a very polite message, expressing interest in revisiting their earlier assessment. Maren declined most of the follow-up interviews. She is not, by nature, someone who enjoys being looked at. What she told me, once, in the transit back, when it was just the 2 of us in the small cabin and the stars were doing what stars do, and the moment seemed like the kind that allows for honesty, was this. She didn't feel chosen. That wasn't the word for it. What she felt was recognized, as if the monolith hadn't granted her something new, as if it had simply corrected a very old record. I asked her if that was frightening. She thought about it for a while. Outside, the dark ran in every direction without end. Not as frightening, she said, as the idea that it waited this long for someone to ask. I didn't have anything to add to that. I still don't.